Hey everybody! So let's picture this today. Two guests visit two different restaurants, both wait exactly 10 minutes for their food. One leaves perfectly satisfied and doesn't think twice about the wait. The other leaves annoyed and later tells friends that the service was painfully slow. The fact is that neither guest is lying. They experienced the same amount of time, yet they walked away with completely different impressions. That happens because customers don't experience waiting through a stopwatch. They experience it through emotions. In hospitality, perception is often more powerful than reality. I have seen restaurants become obsessed with shaving a minute or two off ticket times while completely overlooking the actual reason customers were frustrated. The assumption is usually that if guests are complaining about waiting, the kitchen must be slow. However, after years of working with restaurants, I have learned that delays and frustrations are not always connected. Sometimes the issue isn't the amount of time that passes. Sometimes it's what happens during that time. So I remember working with a restaurant that was receiving repeated complaints about service speed. The owner was convinced they needed additional kitchen equipment and more cooks. Before making any expensive changes, we spent several days observing operations and timing different stages of service. What we discovered surprised everyone. The kitchen wasn't particularly slow. In fact, the average ticket time was well within industry expectations. The real problem was that customers felt disconnected from the process. They weren't being greeted promptly, they weren't being updated, and they often had no idea what was happening after placing an order. The restaurant wasn't creating long waits, it was creating uncertainty. Human beings are naturally uncomfortable with uncertainty. When people don't know what's happening, they begin creating their own explanations. A guest waiting at a table without any communication may start wondering whether their order was forgotten. Another may assume the restaurant is understaffed. Someone else might conclude that management doesn't care about customer service. None of those assumptions may be true, but from the customer's perspective, they feel real. As those thoughts begin to build, every minute starts feeling longer than it actually is. Think about how differently people react in other situations. If you are sitting in an airport and your flight is delayed by 30 minutes without explanation, frustration starts to build up quickly. But if the airline keeps passengers informed and provides regular updates, people tend to remain calmer. The delay hasn't changed, the information surrounding the delay has. Restaurants operate exactly the same way. One thing I have noticed when assessing guest experiences is that customers are remarkably patient when they can see progress. Consider an open kitchen concept. Guests can watch chefs preparing food, hear the activity, and observe the flow of operations. The meal may still take 15 or 20 minutes, but because customers can see movement, they feel reassured. Their minds register that something productive is happening. Compare that to sitting in silence, staring at an empty table, wondering where the food is. The actual waiting time may be identical, but the emotional experience is completely different. This is why some waiting feels heavier than other waiting. Standing at an entrance without acknowledgement can feel incredibly long. Sitting at a table reviewing a menu, talking with friends, or watching food being prepared feels much shorter. The difference isn't the clock. The difference is engagement. When guests are occupied, their attention shifts away from the passage of time. When they have nothing to focus on except waiting, every second becomes noticeable. There is also an important lesson here about expectation management. Many restaurants unintentionally create disappointment by trying too hard to please customers. As a server might say, your food will be ready in 5 minutes, hoping to reassure the guest. The problem comes when those 5 minutes become 10. Even though a 10-minute wait may be completely reasonable, the guest feels let down because the expectation wasn't met. Now imagine a different scenario. A server says, the kitchen is busy tonight, so your order may take around 15 minutes. The food arrives in 10. Suddenly, the guest feels impressed. They may even compliment the service. Yet the actual waiting time was exactly the same as in the first example. The only thing that changed was the expectation. Managing expectations honestly often creates more satisfaction than making optimistic promises. Another factor that shapes customer perception is acknowledgement. People don't expect perfection. Most guests understand that restaurants can get busy. What they struggle with is feeling invisible. A simple visit to the table can make a remarkable difference. Imagine a server approaching a table and saying, "Thank you for your patience. The kitchen is just finishing your order." That interaction takes only a few seconds, but it reassures the guest that they haven't been forgotten. I have seen situations where customers waited longer than usual but remained perfectly happy because staff maintained communication throughout the process. I have also seen customers become frustrated after relatively short waits because nobody acknowledged them. The difference wasn't operational performance, it was emotional management. One restaurant I worked with had an interesting challenge during weekends. The restaurant was consistently busy, which should have been a positive sign. However, customer feedback often mentioned slow service. After observing the operation, we discovered something surprising. Staff members were working hard, but they were spending so much time handling tasks that they forgot to communicate with the guests. Customers weren't upset because of the workload behind the scenes. They were upset because nobody was explaining what was happening. Once the team adopted a simple procedure of updating guests during delays, complaints decreased noticeably. Nothing changed in the kitchen. What changed was the guest experience. This is where operational systems become incredibly important. Many restaurant procedures focus on production, food quality, and cleanliness. Those areas are essential, of course, but there should also be systems designed specifically around the waiting experience. How quickly should guests be greeted? How often should waiting guests receive updates? What should staff say when delays occur? At what point should a supervisor become involved? These questions deserve the same attention as recipe standards and inventory controls. The strongest operators understand that every stage of the customer journey matters. Guests don't separate their experience into categories. They don't think the food was excellent but the communication process was poor. Instead, they evaluate the visit as a whole. Every interaction contributes to the final impression. A delay handled professionally can still result in a positive experience. A short wait handled poorly can damage an entire otherwise excellent meal. Customer psychology also tells us something important about memory. People rarely remember exact timings. A guest who waited 12 minutes isn't likely to remember 12 minutes specifically. What they remember is how they felt during those 12 minutes. Did they feel welcomed? Did they feel respected? Did they feel informed? Did they feel valued? Those emotions stay with people long after details have faded. This is why two different restaurants with similar food quality and similar service can perform very differently. One restaurant may leave guests feeling cared for, while the other leave guests feeling neglected. The difference often comes down to small operational details that many businesses overlook. Greeting guests promptly, providing realistic expectations, offering updates, acknowledging delays, showing appreciation for patience. None of these actions require major investments, yet they can significantly influence customer satisfaction. Another mistake restaurants sometimes make is focusing exclusively on speed as the solution to every service issue. Speed matters, yes, but speed alone isn't enough. A rushed, chaotic experience doesn't necessarily create happy customers. Guests want efficiency, but they also want confidence. They want to know that the restaurant is organized, attentive, and in control. Strong communication creates that confidence. Over the years, some of the highest performing restaurants I have worked with were not always the fastest. What set them apart was their ability to manage expectations and maintain strong communication throughout the guest journey. Customers trusted them even when delays occurred. Guests remained understanding because the restaurant had built credibility through transparency and attentiveness. The next time you are evaluating your operations, don't just measure ticket times. Walk through the experience from the customer's perspective. Stand at the entrance. Sit at the table. Observe what happens during periods of waiting. Ask yourself whether your guests feel informed, acknowledged, or reassured. Often, the answer of those questions reveal more about customer satisfaction than a stopwatch ever will. Because in hospitality, people don't simply remember how long they waited, they remember how the restaurant made them feel while they were waiting. And that distinction can determine whether a customer returns, recommends the restaurant to others, or quietly decides never to come back. The restaurant that consistently creates memorable experiences understands something that many others overlook. Waiting is not just dead time between ordering and eating. It is part of the customer experience. It is another moment where trust can be built or lost. Every interaction during that period shapes the guest perception of the restaurant. So when service feels slow, don't immediately look for solutions in the kitchen. Look at the communication. Look at the guest journey. Look at the systems surrounding the wait itself. Because guests don't measure service with a stopwatch. They measure it with their emotions. So I'm going to leave you with something to think about. Take care and have a good day.